The steady hum of Washington National Airport was a mix of rolling suitcase wheels, scattered boarding announcements, and the faint hiss of espresso machines from the cafe across the concourse. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass walls, casting angled shadows across the polished floor tiles. At Gate 42, a cluster of passengers sat in molded blue chairs, some absorbed in laptops, others scrolling endlessly on phones. Beyond the windows, a white and blue jet rested at the gate. The jet bridge connected like a gangway to another world. Jordan Miles, a tall, athletic-looking 17-year-old with warm brown skin, sat quietly near the center of the seating area. He wore a crisp navy blazer over a plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, and clean white sneakers. Beside his feet rested a slim black garment bag, its zipper pulled tight, the faint outline of a suit visible within. He checked the time on his phone, 9:18 a.m. Boarding was scheduled for 9:35. The event in Washington was only a few hours away, and the garment bag held the suit he'd be wearing on stage. His other hand held his boarding pass, folded neatly in half, along with a government-issued ID. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the gate agent, Nancy Price, a woman in her mid-50s with neatly styled blonde hair and a Navy airline vest, standing behind the counter. She scanned the waiting area with a practiced gaze, her eyes briefly sweeping over each passenger. When her gaze landed on Jordan, it lingered for just a fraction longer. Jordan didn't think much of it at first. People stared sometimes, at his height, his youth, the way he carried himself. He kept his focus on his phone, reading a text from his mother. "Proud of you. Call me when you land." The boarding area smelled faintly of coffee and airport sanitizer. A child's laughter rang out from somewhere behind him. A man in a business suit tapped furiously at his laptop, and a college student sprawled across two chairs, scrolled TikTok with her earbuds in. Still, Jordan felt the weight of that earlier glance. When he looked up again, he caught Nancy watching him once more. Her lips pressed in a tight line as she typed something into the computer. She didn't smile. Adjusting his blazer, Jordan sat back, trying to focus on the excitement ahead rather than the present moment. The presidential medal ceremony was something most people never even dreamed of attending, much less being the one receiving the honor. But for now, in the gate area, he was just another passenger waiting for a flight. Or so he thought. The boarding area was still a calm hum of activity when Nancy Price stepped out from behind the counter. She held a slim clipboard in one hand, her ID badge swinging slightly from its lanyard as she walked toward Jordan Miles. Jordan noticed her approach in his peripheral vision. He straightened in his chair, instinctively resting his hand on the handle of the garment bag by his feet. "Sir," Nancy began, stopping a few feet away. Her voice was polite enough on the surface, but it carried the unmistakable edge of authority. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Jordan nodded without hesitation. "Sure." He handed it over, the paper neatly folded in half. Nancy took it, unfolding it with a practiced snap. Her eyes scanned the details, lingering on the destination, Washington, D.C., and the seat number, 12A. Her lips pressed together for a moment before she looked up at him. "Where are you headed today?" she asked. Jordan blinked, caught slightly off guard. To Washington. And why are you traveling?" The question landed with a faint but noticeable sting. Jordan tilted his head slightly. "I've got an event to attend." "What kind of event?" Nancy pressed, her pen poised over the clipboard, as if his answer might need to be recorded. Jordan hesitated, unsure why she was asking. "It's a formal event. Something I was invited to." Nancy's eyes flicked down to his sneakers, then back to his face. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes," Jordan said, his voice still calm but a touch cooler now. "My parents couldn't come with me this time." Around them, a few passengers were beginning to glance over, sensing that this was more than the usual pre-boarding check. The low murmur of voices in the gate area seemed to fade, replaced by the sharper awareness that something unusual was happening. Nancy handed back the boarding pass, but only briefly. As soon as Jordan reached for it, she kept her hand on it, holding it just out of his grasp. "Just a moment," she said. "I need to verify a few things." Jordan frowned slightly. "Is there a problem?" "We'll see," she replied, her tone clipped. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the counter, the boarding pass still in her hand. Jordan sat back in his seat, his jaw tightening just enough to show his discomfort. The garment bag by his feet suddenly felt heavier, as if the weight of the day ahead was shifting before it even began. Behind the counter at gate 42, the glow from the monitor lit Nancy Price's face in cool blue light. She typed deliberately, her eyes darting between the boarding pass in her hand and the lines of data on the screen. Every so often, she pursed her lips, as though confirming something that only she could see. Jordan watched from his seat, trying to keep his posture calm. The boarding area felt a little tighter now, as if the air had grown heavier. He glanced at the large digital clock on the wall. 9:26 a.m. Boarding was less than 10 minutes away. Nancy finally looked up and beckoned him forward with two fingers. "Sir, could you come here a moment?" Jordan rose, smoothing the front of his blazer. The garment bag slid across the tile floor with a soft scrape as he picked it up. He approached the counter, placing the strap over his shoulder. "Yes?" Nancy's eyes swept over him again before she spoke. "There appears to be a problem with your ticket." Jordan's brow furrowed. "What kind of problem?" "It's not matching in our system the way it should," she said vaguely. "Until we can confirm some details, I can't allow you to board." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Jordan blinked, confused. "But I checked in online this morning. I've got my seat number right there." He pointed at the boarding pass still in her hand. "I understand," Nancy interrupted, her voice cool and professional. "But policy requires that I verify certain information before I can let you on the plane." Passengers nearby began shifting in their seats, pretending to look at their phones while listening in. A middle-aged man in a leather jacket raised an eyebrow. Jordan took a slow breath, willing himself to stay calm. "I have a very important event to get to. If I miss this flight—" "I'm sure it's important," Nancy cut in, "but I have to follow procedure. Please step aside so we can continue boarding the other passengers." It wasn't a suggestion. She gestured toward a spot just beyond the boarding line, a narrow strip of floor between the counter and the windows. Jordan felt the heat rise in his chest. Still, he picked up the garment bag and stepped aside, standing alone while other passengers began to shuffle forward when their groups were called. The click of scanning boarding passes felt unnervingly loud in his ears. Through the window, the jet bridge loomed, the plane's nose visible in the gray morning light. It was right there, close enough to touch, and yet, for the moment, completely out of reach. Jordan checked his watch again, his pulse quickening. The event in D.C. was starting to feel farther away with every passing second. The boarding process began in earnest, with the overhead announcement calling Group 1 in a calm, automated voice. Passengers rose from their seats, forming a short line that snaked toward the gate scanner. The rhythm of boarding, the scan beep, the rolling luggage, the polite thank yous, carried on as if nothing unusual was happening. But for Jordan Miles, standing off to the side near the tall windows, the space felt like a spotlight had been thrown on him. His slim black garment bag hung from his right hand, its weight pulling on his arm. The other hand rested lightly in his pocket, fingers brushing the folded paper of his ID. Every few seconds, he glanced toward Nancy Price, who was now greeting passengers with a bright professional smile, a smile that had been entirely absent in their own exchange. Occasionally, her eyes would flick toward Jordan, as if to ensure he was still waiting exactly where she'd told him. From the other end of the counter, a passing flight attendant, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair, pulled into a neat bun, caught sight of Jordan. She slowed, her brow knitting in concern, and walked over to him. "Hi there," she said quietly, her tone friendly but cautious. "Are you boarding this flight?" "Yes," Jordan replied, trying to keep his voice even. "Or at least I'm supposed to. The agent said there's a problem with my ticket." She glanced toward Nancy, who was scanning another passenger's boarding pass. "Do you mind if I check with her?" Before Jordan could answer, Nancy's voice cut across the counter. "Everything's fine, Melissa. Just handling a verification. Please continue with pre-boarding." The flight attendant, Melissa, hesitated for a moment, her lips pressing together as if she wanted to say more. Instead, she gave Jordan a small, reassuring nod. "Hang in there," she murmured before moving toward the jet bridge. Jordan shifted his weight, looking out the window at the plane. The gray morning light reflected faintly on the smooth white fuselage. He imagined himself already seated by the window, cruising toward Washington instead of here, standing in full view of a growing number of curious eyes. Two teenage boys across the seating area whispered to each other, stealing glances in his direction. An older woman with a floral scarf gave him a puzzled look, her brow furrowed as she followed the silent drama unfolding near the gate. Jordan checked the time again. 9:39 a.m. The event in Washington was starting to feel uncomfortably close. The garment bag in his hand suddenly felt like both a lifeline and a weight, a reminder of why this trip mattered, and of how quickly it could slip away if he didn't get on that plane. The line of passengers had thinned to just a few stragglers when the rhythmic sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the concourse. The sharp click of polished shoes against the tile carried an urgency that made heads turn. From the far end of the gate area, a tall, sharply dressed man in a dark, tailored suit appeared, scanning the crowd with quick, purposeful movements. His silver tie caught the overhead light, and in one hand he clutched a slim leather briefcase. His expression was tense, focused, as he strode toward the gate. When his eyes landed on Jordan Miles, still standing off to the side with his garment bag in hand, he quickened his pace. "Jordan!" he called, his voice warm but brisk. Jordan's head snapped up, relief flashing in his eyes. "Mr. Alvarez." Miguel Alvarez, special liaison from the White House Office of Public Engagement, stopped beside Jordan, resting a hand briefly on his shoulder. "I've been trying to find you since you landed. Why are you over here? Boarding should have started for you 20 minutes ago." Before Jordan could answer, Nancy Price stepped forward from behind the counter. Her smile was polite but guarded. "This passenger's ticket wasn't verifying properly in the system. I couldn't allow him to board until it was cleared." Alvarez's gaze hardened. "This passenger," he said, placing deliberate emphasis on the word, "is on an extremely tight schedule. He is the recipient of the Presidential Medal for Bravery today. Today, as in a few hours from now. And he's traveling under official arrangements made by my office." A ripple of surprise moved through the small crowd of onlookers. The two teenage boys who had been whispering earlier sat up straighter. The woman with the floral scarf actually gasped softly. Nancy blinked, her hand frozen halfway to the counter. I wasn't aware." "That's because it wasn't your job to be aware," Alvarez cut in smoothly but firmly. "Your job was to let him board with the valid credentials he already presented. Now you've delayed us, and we have very little time to make up for it." Jordan stood quietly beside Alvarez, his composure intact, but his eyes betraying a flicker of vindication. Alvarez turned to him. "Let's get you on that plane. They'll have people waiting for us on the other end." As he guided Jordan toward the boarding gate, passengers shifted in their seats, some whispering to each other, others simply watching with wide-eyed curiosity. Nancy remained behind the counter, her cheeks tinged pink, her professional smile frozen in place. In the background, the automated voice announced the final boarding call for Flight 217 to Washington, D.C. This time, Jordan was walking toward it, not away. Nancy Price stepped quickly from behind the counter, the low heels of her shoes tapping against the polished floor. Her smile had returned, but it was no longer the crisp, professional expression she wore earlier. It was wider now, almost strained, and her voice had taken on a higher pitch. "Oh, Mr. Miles," she said brightly, as though addressing a long-lost friend. "We've resolved that little hiccup in the system. You're all set to board now. Let me just—" She reached for the garment bag slung over Jordan's arm. "Here, let me carry that for you." Jordan gave a polite but firm shake of his head. "I've got it, thanks." "Yes, of course," Nancy said quickly, pulling her hands back. She smoothed the front of her vest in a small, nervous gesture, then pivoted toward the boarding scanner. "Right this way. We'll get you on immediately." Miguel Alvarez stayed close beside Jordan, his presence radiating quiet authority. He didn't say anything to Nancy, but the faint arch of his eyebrow as she fussed over the scanner said enough. Nancy scanned Jordan's boarding pass with exaggerated care, holding the beep of the machine like a final note of redemption. "There we go," she said cheerfully. "You'll be in 12A, a lovely seat by the window. Please enjoy the flight. And, good luck with your big event today." A murmur of recognition passed through the waiting area as passengers realized they were in the presence of someone important. A man in a business suit gave Jordan a respectful nod. The woman in the floral scarf smiled warmly. Nancy, eager to reclaim some dignity, added, "We're so proud to have you flying with us today. I'm sure everyone is." Her voice was loud enough for the gate area to hear, as if public approval might erase what had happened just minutes earlier. Jordan offered a small, polite smile. "Thank you." His tone was neutral, courteous, but without the warmth that would have signaled forgiveness. As he and Alvarez walked down the jet bridge, Nancy remained by the scanner, watching them disappear into the narrow tunnel. Her smile lingered, but as soon as they were out of sight, it faltered. The muscles in her jaw tightened, and she turned back to her computer with a mechanical precision, avoiding the eyes of the passengers still in the seating area. In the quiet between boarding calls, the incident seemed to hang in the air. Not loud, but not forgotten. The cabin lights glowed with a soft, amber warmth as Jordan Miles settled into seat 12A. The hum of the jet's engines was steady, almost soothing. Outside his window, the gray morning sky hung low, the edges of the runway blurred by a lingering mist. He placed his garment bag carefully in the overhead bin before sitting, ensuring the fabric inside remained smooth and untouched. Now, with his seatbelt fastened, he allowed himself a small exhale, a slow release of tension that had been coiled tight since the moment he stepped up to gate 42. Across the aisle, Miguel Alvarez sat with his briefcase on his lap, scrolling quickly through his phone, no doubt confirming details for their arrival in Washington. Occasionally, he glanced toward Jordan, offering a reassuring nod, but said nothing. The unspoken understanding between them didn't need words. As the plane began to taxi, Jordan's gaze drifted to the window. The terminal slid past, glass walls reflecting streaks of sunlight breaking through the clouds. For a brief moment, his eyes caught sight of the gate they had just left. There, behind the counter, Nancy Price stood near the boarding scanner. She wasn't smiling now. Her shoulders had a subtle hunch, her hands clasped in front of her as she watched the jet move away. The look on her face was difficult to read from this distance, but it carried the weight of someone who had just replayed the same moment in her mind, over and over, and wished it had gone differently. The plane paused at the end of the runway. Jordan's mind, too, paused, hovering between relief and reflection. He thought about how quickly the world had decided who he was that morning, before he even had the chance to speak for himself. About how easily a person's worth could be judged by their age, their clothes, or their skin, before anyone bothered to learn their name. The engines roared, the acceleration pressing him gently into the seat. Through the glass, the ground fell away, the runway shrinking beneath them. Washington was ahead now, and with it, a moment that would be captured in photographs, applause, and a medal placed around his neck by the president himself. Still, he knew this morning's memory would linger, not to sour the day, but to sharpen it. A reminder that even moments of triumph carried the shadow of the struggle to be seen for who you truly are. As the clouds swallowed the plane and the sunlight streamed through, Jordan allowed himself one quiet smile. The world had tried to keep him in the waiting area. He was, as always, going somewhere far beyond it.